It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, December 28th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is having so much fun with World Juniors this time around, Russ. A lot of upsets so far.
Yeah, it's a great time of the year. Love watching the games.
All right, we're going to get to more World Juniors news and get into what the Phantoms are up to, plus your mailbag questions, all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Flyers. That is where you'll keep up to date on our episodes and Flyers news, all that good stuff. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. That's how you can ask mailbag questions, which we are getting to today, of course. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you're listening right now. So subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Plus, we're over on YouTube, so you can watch us over there. Russ, we were nervous yesterday about Carter Hart. It was kind of the big subject of conversation because he had gotten injured in that game against Carolina. And we had a practice yesterday. So he was on the ice and playing, and according to John Tortorella, is good to go. So that is a sigh of relief. Felix Sandstrom was also back from illness, but Sam Ersson was still there at practice. I think it seems like from, what Tortorella was saying, that was just kind of a just in case situation. But I guess we'll find out more today at their last practice in Voorhees before they take off to go out west.
Well, the big thing I would say is, have they learned anything? Are they going to adjust Carter Hart's schedule? Or are they going to just throw him in there for, the most games in the league? Like, is that their goal?
It's a really good question. And I think it's one that, really needs to be asked if they are going to change anything, like you said, about how they're going to deploy the goalies. And it has been interesting because it seems like, and as we touched on yesterday a little bit, that their choices in terms of forward lines and, how they're doing things, in terms of improving the processes with the skaters, that winning and losing doesn't matter,
right,
to John Tortorella. But with goaltending, it seems like it does. And I'm having a little bit of a trouble kind of, justifying these two approaches for the different roles.
Well, it's almost like he's got this goalie, so he knows that if he's going to have a bad year, he doesn't want to be embarrassed out there. But you know what? Like, you can't put that all on Carter Hart and say, all right, well, now you're just going to have to play not only the most games you've ever played, but, and then some. Like, it's just, I get it when there's goalies down the stretch and they're playing games because they're trying to make the playoffs. That makes sense to me. But they're not making the playoffs. That's pretty obvious. So what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, to me, you want to get Felix Sandstrom and Sam Ersson to some degree, but a lesser degree than Felix Sandstrom. But you want to get those guys as many games as possible without going overboard, right? You do want to acknowledge that Carter Hart is your number one goaltender, but you really need to know if Felix Sandstrom can be in it for the long haul. You need to know if Sam Ersson can step up, and be available as an NHL goaltender. And, he's only had the one game, Ersson. And so you don't, obviously, you wouldn't judge just on that one game alone. But I think it's important for the team and the future and knowing who your tandem's going to be to get Felix Sandstrom in more games. And, I think you're right in terms of, leaning on Carter Hart to save them from too many losses, which to be fair, isn't working. Like,
No,
let's be real here. So
no.
if you're putting Hart in too much and you're not achieving the desired effect, like, what's the point to me?
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. Like, what are we doing here? Let's temper this. Let's even it out a bit. I mean, I get it. He's going to play a lot more than the backup, but he should not play. There's a certain number I wouldn't go over. Let's just say that.
I think so as well. Speaking of the forward lines on the other side of things, not really seeing any changes there, which is fine. I think that's where they've settled for now.
Yeah.
Again, we've talked about how we really haven't liked Hayes and Lawton together. That Lawton needs a little bit more jump on that line. That Allison is there, and hopefully he'll get back up to full strength. And help Scott Lawton there, because you really have noticed Scott Lawton more on the penalty kill, right, than anything else recently.
Yeah, he just hasn't. Allison hasn't played enough games, and it's just there haven't been enough games since he's come back. So I don't know where he's at, and as far as that goes, but I think he could help to some degree.
Yeah, I think so too. And I want to continue to see that Frost line with JVR and Owen Tippett. And I think Cates is settling in as center to Farabee and Konechny right now. And obviously Konechny is playing well. So I wouldn't want to break that up for now either, especially on this road trip where you have some chances to get some wins in against a couple of weaker teams. I think they should, stick with this for a little bit, at least to get some consistency and see, how that works out for them.
Mm-hmm.
So switching over to World Juniors, when we were recording yesterday's show, it was like near the beginning of the Canada game. And I think Canada was up 1-0 when we finished recording.
Yes.
And score really did switch around. Canada was upset by Czechia 5-2 in that game. 5-2 games seem to be a trend in this tournament so far. We've had 3 of them in just 2 days. But I do think that while it was a remarkable upset, number one, in our preview with Chris Peters, we talked specifically about Czechia, and that was a team to watch out for, and there's a lot of talent there. So I do not want to discount that. But at the same time, I also think that Team Canada is still really good on paper. And they're a team that sometimes has clunky losses like this, but they tend to peak at the right time in tournaments. So I'm not worried about them. I think, the media and the fan consternation about it is an immediate reaction, but I think Team Canada is going to be fine.
They'll be fine. It's just they were great in showing off their one-on-one talent, but it didn't work as a team. I don't care that they tried Michigan's. That doesn't bother me. No. I just want results. And if they're not going to get results, then don't do the Michigans, because, your odds of scoring are going to go down. But if the chance is there, sure, take it. That's fine. I don't care that they did it. I know some people have a problem with it. I don't. But, again, don't keep showing Connor Bedard almost goals either. Like, I get the great moves, but, he didn't play the best game. Like,
not overall. No, he needs some work.
He needs some work. And so it's like, I get you want to pump him up, but maybe don't pump him up so much until he's actually playing better. That's the thing. I think it's a challenge for the coach to not have these guys get all of this spotlight for themselves and still play like a team. We knew the goaltending was going to be bad. We talked about it. So they switched already to Milic, and that's fine. We all agreed that was going to happen. So it happened quicker than we thought. Okay. Defense is good. The Brandt Clark thing I didn't love, because that happened at the end of the game, and he was so frustrated. He was just kind of like, oh, well. And you could read his lips. And he didn't mean that like, oh, well, like I may have hurt the guy. He was just like, oh, well, that's the way this game is going. Like, it's just, and Czechia took it easy on him at the end. They probably could have scored another goal or two on the power play, but they really didn't even try. They were just passing it around and eventually just took
they were eating up clock. It was very clear that's what they were doing.
So, I mean, listen, they have to win their next game. They can't lose another one. So there is a certain amount of pressure on them no matter what. So I can't say everything will be normal, but what I can say is they've got to get some goals early to get their confidence back, because they did lose their confidence in that game.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the nature of this tournament when it's focused on, prospect draft eligible prospects, and then, when you're covering these games, you're looking at, oh, who are my team's prospects in the tournament. And so you have this battle between talking about the individual players as they relate to whatever NHL team you're interested in, or as a draft analyst. And you forget sometimes that this all has to work as a team. Like, it's about the teams. It's not about the individual players, like you said. And so I think that's important for all of us, myself included, right? To think
Yeah.
about as I'm watching the tournament in terms of wins and losses and predictions and all of that. It's still a team game at the end of the day.
You're not going to win it with one guy.
All right, we are going to talk about the Flyers prospects in Lehigh Valley. This is where the team and the prospects overlap together, and it is for one purpose, and we will do that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to college bowl season, basketball to soccer, esports, and of course the NHL. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts like ours, you could find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. It's the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and their take of the day. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. So, Russ, the Phantoms, it feels like it's been a while since we've talked about them. It's just an extra day because of the holiday weekend. And they had 2 games last week before they returned to action tonight, actually. So the AHL is getting spun up at the same time as the NHL does after the Christmas break. And they split the 2 games, losing to Hershey 4-2. There was an empty net goal in that one. But they won on Friday versus Springfield 2-1. 2 very close games with differing results. Hershey is, of course, like dominating this season. And so, to keep it close against them, I think is pretty good for the Phantoms. But ultimately, they still need to build up points to make the playoffs.
They're not getting enough points. They just aren't.
Yeah. It's tough because they're in 6th in the division right now. Hershey and Providence, which for some reason the Phantoms have had really good success against. They're up top. But then you have kind of a range of 27 to 33 point swing with varying games played. And so if you look at it amongst the other teams, there's definitely room to move up. And the Phantoms do have the talent to do it right now. It's just a matter of if they can do it. And, when we talk about the Phantoms making the playoffs, we've said this before, but it bears repeating. It's really important for the prospects in Lehigh Valley to experience playoff style hockey, whether it's at the AHL level or the NHL level. And that's why we harp on this team trying to make the playoffs, even though you think it might not matter from a Flyers perspective.
Right. So a few things. Their penalty minutes are still way too high. The goals for is pathetic compared to the rest of the league. They are just not scoring. And that's got to be problem number one that's got to get solved. 5-4-1 in their last 10. If they keep going 5-4-1, they're going to keep being in 6th and 5th and 6th place. So this is where the coaching staff has to sort of step up and keep trying to change things and tinker a little bit, because they're not getting enough goals. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, that's why they're having these games. It's the goaltending's fine. They're not losing because of goaltending. They're losing because of offensive output. Lack of.
Yeah. And speaking of goaltending, Pat Nagel is back up with the Phantoms because Sam Ersson got called up. And he's been, again, he's Johnny on the spot. He's always going to put in a good effort for you. He'll have a bad game every now and again, but he had 2 pretty solid games. I would say the second one, against Springfield was a little better, but overall, Pat Nagel is rock solid. And so you don't really have any worries there. They were missing Kevin Connaughton because he is overplaying playing in the Spengler Cup. Danny Briere is an assistant GM of Team Canada for the Spengler Cup. So far, they've played one game and lost to HC Sparta Prague. But, for the Spengler Cup fans out there,
once in a while, somebody from the Spengler Cup comes back and plays in the NHL. It happens.
Yeah. But they're missing a little bit on the defensive side because he's a pretty solid AHL level defenseman right now. But
still not going to matter for goals.
No, it's not. And the other problem is that, you have Artem Anisimov, and, it's fun. He's got, 13 points, 10 goals, 3 assists, and 12 games played for the Phantoms.
Imagine where they'd be without him.
Right. So you imagine what would they be without him? And, is he taking opportunities away from the prospects in terms of scoring opportunities?
He's helping them too. So
yeah, it's a mixed bag
for 50,
me.
50.
Yeah, on that front. And that, without him, I don't know, man.
You could be looking at last year.
Yeah.
That's the situation. And that's what we, again, we might be looking at this team and saying in another 20 games, the coaches know better than last year.
Yeah. I mean, so far it's been better than last year. We can't say great, but it's been better than last year. And so I think that, we're still on the positive side of things, but, we have to be cautious by hair, but we do have to be cautious here because I think some of these guys are still being streaky where you notice we say oh, this guy had a really great weekend. And then we have to wait 3 weeks before we talk about him again because he doesn't make a huge impact. We need more consistency from everybody across the board. That's Kieffer Bellows. That's Tyson Foerster, who still leads the team with 19 points, but he didn't get on the scoreboard in those 2 games.
Yeah.
Olle Lycksell, I think, he had a really solid weekend of play, but again, he had 1 assist. That was actually really good. I'm not going to lie. It was a great feed to Anisimov for a goal, but we just need more consistency across the board from all these guys. And I would say, the only couple of guys that I think I would want to necessarily talk about every week because of their on-ice performance and not just because we have to cover them as Flyers prospects, I would say is Elliot Denoyer. There's always something that I want to talk about with him. And he had a really nice goal versus Hershey. And then, I want to talk about Igor Zamula because I care about his development, whether he plays good or bad, but he doesn't always do what he needs to in order to stand out either.
So also with special teams in the division, the Phantoms are best on the power play now. So that's gone up. That's good. And worst on the PK. And they were good on the PK for a little while.
They were.
And so that's another thing where that's costing them now.
It is. And they allowed a power play goal against Hershey that was the go-ahead goal in the 3rd period, that cost them that game. And again, it was a close game, like I said, but it was just unfortunate that they couldn't, maintain that even strength and get a chance to win that one. So, again, I think with the Phantoms here, we just have to go into this next batch of games and see what we can accomplish and then hopefully see some more consistency with some of these guys. And especially, I think, on the defensive side of things. I think Adam Ginning, we talked about him last week. I think he had a really good couple of games as well. And we talked about it last week that he's kind of learning more how to step up into the play offensively, that's not his forte, but he's learning more when he can do it. And it is helping the team. It really did.
Yeah, it's good for the team. He won't do that at the next level, but it is good for the team.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's just kind of rounding out his game a little bit. He had a really nice shot in the Hershey game that led to the Denoyer goal, right? It was a rebound that Denoyer picked up off a Ginning shot. So I want to see that continue. But I think
season for him so far, no doubt.
Yeah, I think so. And so that's good to see. I just want to see, Zamula, Adard, and Ginning. I want to, by the end of this season, I want to be in inner conflict about which ones I want to see moved up because they've all been successful, right?
Yeah, I mean, right now my gut tells me only one of the three would be moved up, but you never know. By the end of the year, maybe that changes.
Yeah. Yeah. We shall see on that front. We have 3 games this week, tonight versus Bridgeport. We've got Friday at Utica and Saturday against the dreaded Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins.
That
So
one will always be a tough game, man, no matter what.
no matter what, it's so frustrating. But
And that one's the
and
one they have to win because that's
Mhm.
divisional. They're ahead of them in the division. They need to win that game.
Yeah, and then on the other side, they should win against Bridgeport, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's a struggle. So I think that they really need to pick up all, if not most, of the points.
It'll depend if Aturatu is playing for them or the Islanders still. Like, that'll make a big
Right.
difference in that game.
Yet another Flyers draft regret I
Yep.
have. But yeah, that's another one that I will haunt me for a long time, I think.
In the division, that's going to haunt you for sure.
Yep. All right, we are going to get to your mailbag questions coming up next. All right, we have some good ones today. First one is a World Juniors question. Are there any draft eligible players that have stood out so far that we should add to our list?
I mean, adding to it, I mean, I would assume that, Fantilli and Bedard and, I mean, I'm trying to think if there's somebody on the, Carlson's on there, but I'm trying to think if there's somebody on the outside that, I mean,
Like on Slovakia or
yeah, I don't think anybody there. I think Stramel's another guy you have to watch because, if for some reason the Flyers are unlucky and they're somewhere around 9 or 10, he's looked really good and he's a big guy who could score, who can play a physical game as well. So maybe add Charlie on that list. I don't think there's any goalies. If you want to add Sandin Pellikka, that's fine. I'm high on him, and he's a defenseman, and he's doing really well. He may not be showing it all off in points, but the fact that he's a young guy, I think he's maybe just turned 18, and so playing in the SHL, playing on the top power play, maybe add him in there as well.
All right. We were speaking about Carter Hart earlier, and so this question is, how many games should Carter Hart start versus Felix Sandstrom?
Well, it's a good question. So I started to look at these things, and what I came out of it with was last year, the most amount of games was 67, UC Saros. And he's a little bit of an older goalie. I think he's 26. But Hart's played nowhere near that in his career, right? So I'm not going to be comfortable with anything over 55. To me, if you go over 55, that's a lot. He's at 27 now, leading the league. So he's probably going to be in the 60s if he stays on this pace. And it's assuming he could play these games. I mean, again, he's lucky that he's not going to miss anything here, but that doesn't mean he won't be missing down the road because you're playing him too many games. So ideally, like 52 would be ideal. But it doesn't seem like Torts will play Sandstrom 30 games. Like, it just doesn't seem like that's possible. So I'll go to 55 and hope that Torts will actually play Sandstrom the rest of the games, the remainder. But I don't know if he will. And that is part of the problem here. Would Torts feel better if it was Troy Grosenick? Like, I don't know what would make him feel better. But clearly he's got an issue with the young guys in net and a very short fuse as far as pulling them. Everybody could say that he was trying to help Ursan. Fine, maybe he was. But is he going to do that every time? You can't do that every time when Hart's playing 3 out of every 4, because then the guy never gets a day off.
Yeah, I would like Sam Ursan to get, another 2 or 3 games maybe in this season, and hopefully with Sandstrom picking up the other ones, like you said. But I think, 55 is probably a good max out number for Carter Hart. I think that that sounds about right. And then you just have Felix Sandstrom make up the difference,
Right.
knock on wood,
And then you'll
nobody
know,
gets
like, you
hurt.
have to know
Mhm.
what he is going to be. And if the coach doesn't like him or feel like he's the guy, then you'll go out and get a backup next year. That's fine.
Yep, that is the way to approach it. Looking ahead to the draft, should the Flyers this year, because of the depth of the draft, take the best player available or go with the organizational need?
Well, I would say it two ways. If it's the same group intact, then go best player available. If there are different people in charge in different places that have a plan that says, hey, in 3 years we want to be this, or 4 years we want to be this, then maybe you take out of need. But if everything stays the same, I'll say best player available. There are teams that draft out of need when they know what's going on, when they know what the plan is, when they have an idea of when they take a player, maybe when he's going to get to the. It doesn't happen often, but it's happening more often now. The last 3 or 4 years, you could see it. I use New Jersey and Simone Nemec as an example. You can't tell me he's better than David Jiricek. I just won't believe you. But for whatever reason, I think they realized he would get to the NHL quicker, maybe. And so they wanted to go that route, or because of just the way he fits in their system, that's why they went with him. But I don't think he was the best player available too. I don't. So that just shows you the difference. But the Flyers really aren't now where the Devils were even last year, because you could see the difference in the organizations this year.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting to talk about it in terms of, what the need is, right? Is it a positional need in terms of, what the team is weakest at, but then also looking at the depth at the various positions and how fast you think somebody can get to the NHL, because that could be a need as well, right? That it's not necessarily a positional need, but as we need somebody now need.
Well, I mean, I'll just give you an example, right? Worst case scenario, Sean Couturier comes back. He doesn't look great. The team huddles up and realizes he's never going to be the same again. So now we have to be on the hunt again for a number one center. You're in the draft, the number one center is on the board. Like, you have to take them. Like, if you know
Right.
that, you have to take them knowing how rare they are, and you don't have one in your system anymore. So something like that could cause that.
Because it's a situation where like 2 2s doesn't add up to a 1.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. When will Chuck Fletcher speak next? And if you were him, what would you say to the fans?
I think he will speak next a month before the trading deadline, a couple weeks before the trading deadline, because at that point he could give an update on Sean Couturier. What should he say? What he should say to the fans is, right now we're going to be sellers at the deadline this year. Did not go the way I planned. And, we are in the midst of a rebuild. We're currently working on the plan for that rebuild, but that's what we're doing. I know what I said last year, even this year at some point was, optimistic, but, things have changed. So now we've changed direction. That's what he should say. Do I think he's going to say that? No. He's going to say we're going to try and make a hockey trade, and he's going to use all the same stuff again.
Yeah, I do think he'll have to say something before the All-Star break.
Maybe.
I think that's, when he'll have to say something significant next. And I think that's when the topic of trades will come up, and, what he thinks the plan is. If he says something like still formulating a plan, I think people are going to lose their minds, because look at all this time to plan. We're planning the plan, like, I just think it's absolute bonkers that
it is possible, though. And, the only thing he'll waste half the time talking about, like, Carter Hart being the only All-Star on the team. Like, he'll talk about the season he's had and everything else and waste a lot of that time. There's nobody else is an All-Star on this team.
No, although Konechny, I think if they can't figure out a way to get Carter Hart there,
then it'll be
because of the divisional structure,
right.
Then it'll be Konechny.
Right.
That is my prediction. All right, that will do it for the mailbag. Our Flyers fun thing. The Phantoms are doing a New Year's Eve puck drop, kind of like the ball dropping at Times
Yeah, I like it.
Square. They're making a giant hockey puck for downtown Allentown, which sounds like a lot of fun, and you should go if you are in that area.
Yeah, if I wasn't like a couple hours away, I would go. I think that's awesome.
Yep, I think so too. All right, we will be back again tomorrow. We are going to get to talk about a Flyers game, actually, preview the matchup against the Sharks, and so much more. As a reminder, we want to hear from you. If you've got mailbag questions you want us to answer, you can tweet us at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, or you can comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen. Now make Locked On Sports your second listen. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. You can get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great day.